We'll now welcome the National Network on Cuba, or the NNOC, for a special presentation on Cuban solidarity. This organization is going to give us more information about how we can contribute to their solidarity campaigns to provide material aid to Cuba. Please consider using the donation link in the International Department's Twitter and website, again at redworldreview.org/signup, to raise money for Cuban solidarity campaigns. After the conference, 100% of the donations will be sent in one lump sum to the National Network on Cuba to support aid to Cuba. Please join me in welcoming Cheryl Labash and Mimut Nuhu from the National Network on Cuba. Mimut is a community organizer, youth educator in California, and is part of the House of Sankofa, an all-African People's Revolutionary Party. He coordinates the U.S. participation in the International May Day Brigade for the National Network on Cuba. Cheryl Labash is also a co-chair of the National Network on Cuba. Cheryl's first trip to Cuba was 1985 as a member of the executive board of her ASHME local at the City of Detroit, the Health Department. Then and still today, the disproportionately high infant mortality in that majority African-American city fueled her activism with Doctors for Detroit, supporting Cuba's medical scholarship program and opportunities for graduates. Cheryl also works in Washington, D.C. on national mobilization and legislative advocacy to end the U.S. economic, financial, and commercial blockade of Cuba, and writes on current Cuba-related developments as well. Cheryl and Mimut, you now have the floor.
I have too many screens open. Let me share a slide first. That way I can get rid of some of these screens and move on with what I have to say. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us to this important anti-imperialist conference. So timely. We want to introduce the National Network on Cuba. We're basically the umbrella organization for Cuba solidarity in the United States. We promote and coordinate activities that are designed to end, hopefully, and eventually it will, the economic, financial, commercial, and media war against Cuba and return the illegal occupied US naval base in Guantanamo to the Cuban people. Mimut and I are 2 of 5 elected co-chairs. In 1991, there were 11 organizations and 4 observers who participated in founding the NNOC. As you can see on the screen, the number now is more than 50. Okay. But I don't have that up. Right, here we go. Here we go, like that. We're distributed across the United States, large and small, national and local, Cuba-specific or Latin America. Some organize specialized travel and others organize large solidarity brigades. Since 1960, our partner, the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the People, ECAP, has connected globally with Cuba's solidarity community. Today, we work collaboratively with ECAP, the Cuban Embassy in Washington, D.C., and Cuba's mission to the United Nations in New York. Since the revolution on January 1st, 1959, Cuba has been a beacon for young revolutionaries, internationalists, civil voting rights, and anti-war organizers who traveled whatever way they could, and sometimes it was on converted cattle boats to see Cuba for themselves. So why did it take until 1991 to form the NNOC? After all, the US targeted Cuba almost immediately after the revolution. It was only 16 months later that the strategy was on paper. The Mallory-Rubottom memo, secret memo, that says as adroitly and inconspicuously as possible to make the greatest inroads in denying money and supplies to Cuba, to decrease monetary and real wages, to bring about hunger, desperation, and the overthrow of the government. And that is the policy that we see today as well, from 1960. A year later, in the midst of Cuba's literacy campaign, the US mounted the Bay of Pigs Playa Girón invasion, but revolutionaries defeated the mercenaries. The US had held back from direct intervention, but would it invade again? Defensive missiles provided by the Soviet Union led to the 1962 October missile crisis and the danger of nuclear war. The missiles were removed after the US agreed not to invade its smaller neighbor, but it was an agreement that was backed by the Soviet Union. Then in 1991, the guarantor of that agreement, the Soviet Union and Cuba's other major Eastern European trading partners, were no longer a buffer against US aggression. Overnight, an unprecedented economic crisis, the special period in time of peace, was forced on the Cuban people. Would the US take advantage of this and invade again? The US movement responded to this grave danger by forming the National Network on Cuba, because together we can be stronger and more effective. And the purpose was to promote communication, coordination, and cooperation among the Friends of Cuba nationally. Today, the intensified US blockade is unprecedented. The merciless campaign did not and does not let up, not even during the pandemic when Cuba's income from tourism dropped to zero. Cuba prioritized its scant resources to saving lives in Cuba and around the world. To make doubly certain, Cuba couldn't buy ventilators, oxygen, components for their vaccines, or anything on the capitalist market. The State Department returned Cuba to its arbitrary, made-up list of state sponsors of terrorism. Our movement is challenged again today. A stroke of Joe Biden's pen can remove Cuba from that list. 3,478 Cubans have been killed in terrorist attacks against the island and its people. On October 6, 1976, a date just coming up, Cubana Flight 455 took off from Barbados and exploded midair. It was the first midair bombing of a civilian plane. Everyone on board was killed. The architects and paymaster of the bombers died peacefully in Florida, Luis Posada Carriles, and the US dares to put Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Let's organize and fight to delist Cuba. We can do it. Now I want to turn the program over to my comrade, colleague, and co-chair, Mimut Nuhu.
Thank you, Sister Cheryl. Greetings once again, everyone. I'm Mimut Nuhu, and on behalf of the NNOC co-chairs, I would like to thank you all for the invitation and the time to lift up Cuba and the solidarity work that is being done here in the United States. In the interest of time, we will briefly discuss some of the ongoing campaigns the NNOC is involved in. Please feel free to visit our website to receive additional information about these campaigns. First, we'll talk about the caravans. Every month, we have car and bike caravans across the United States to raise awareness about Cuba and the genocidal blockade that is focused at destroying the will of the Cuban people and crippling the Cuban economic system. The NNOC is taking part in the Saving Lives campaign, which is focused on providing outreach to medical professionals to inform them about Cuba's medical advancements and the ongoing needs to support Cuba's free healthcare system.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries, sister. The NNOC is taking part in the Saving Lives campaign, which is focused on providing outreach to the medical professionals to inform them about Cuba's medical advancements and the ongoing need to support Cuba's free healthcare system. The Saving Lives campaign works to fundraise to assist in securing medical supplies that are essential for the Cuban healthcare system and the Cuban people. Resolutions. Information about resolutions is provided to those people who are looking to secure official statements from politicians who agree the blockade should be brought down. The NNOC has developed materials and a step-by-step process that provides guidance to people who are working to have their local politicians sign and pass resolutions to end the blockade. The All 50 States plus DC is a campaign geared at displaying the widespread support for Cuba and the Cuban people here in the United States. We had at least one person from each state plus DC take a picture holding a sign demanding the destruction of the inhumane and immoral blockade. Every year, the NNOC works to bring awareness to the annual vote at the UN General Assembly to ensure people are clear that majority of the world sides with us when it comes to the Cuba question and the debilitating blockade. Since 1992, there has only been 2 countries who are consistently in favor of the blockade, as opposed to at least 189 to 191 countries who are against the blockade. The Mayday Brigade has been an important part of the NNOC's annual work. The NNOC has worked to ensure people have an opportunity to engage with the Cuban people, work with the Cuban people, learn from the Cuban people, march with the Cuban people in one of the largest marches honoring the working people in the world. Once the Brigadistas return to the United States, they are equipped with information and experiences to properly educate the masses about the reality in Cuba. The Mayday Brigade is one of the multiple delegations that member organizations of the NNOC organize throughout the year. The Vincent Ramos Brigade is leading a delegation to Cuba at the end of this year. Although each brigade is different because they have various objectives, the trips are more similar than different. So here's a short video that the Vincent Ramos Brigade developed to show the people what they are missing.
Caballeros, buenos días, bienvenidos a La Habana, Cuba, hora local aproximadamente las 11:35 de la mañana. En nuestra tripulación con base en la ciudad de Miami, le damos las gracias por haber volado con nosotros. Le pedimos que por su seguridad permanezca sentado con su cinturón completamente abrochado hasta que estemos en la puerta de llegada y el capitán haya apagado el aviso de abrocharse los cinturones. Mantenga los pasillos libres de acceso y los compartimientos superiores cerrados.
We believe in the constitutional right of U.S. citizens to travel, move, and freely associate. We demand an immediate end to all U.S. imposed restrictions on travel to and from Cuba, and we commit to civil disobedience in protest of these policies. At the same time, we recognize the privilege conferred by U.S. citizenship. We believe in the human right of all people worldwide to move freely, and we reject all attacks by the U.S. government on migrants inside and outside our borders.
Para no estorbarte. vida y dejar en mi pecho este inmenso dolor que me acaba la vida y decirte
humility. Yeah.
So coming here, like doing that physical labor, just makes me feel more connected.
Solidaridad es no dar lo que nos sobra, sino compartir lo que tenemos.
You know, on one hand, it means connecting with this land that is liberated, and it's rare to touch land that is free. But it also means contributing in a concrete way.
Create common understanding of how we move our work forward across all of our communities.
Connect with all the different stories of like what life here in Cuba is like, being shoulder to shoulder with people and coming in with respect.
La solidaridad no es más que compartir lo poco que tenemos, no es dar lo que nos sobra, es compartir con aquel que está necesitado, con aquel que necesita una mano amiga y simplemente estar en el momento preciso.
Taking the next step to actually engage in activities that are supportive, that are loving, that are based on mutual respect, and that are also grounded in understanding.
And common struggle with anyone else who's making that effort, because it has to be international in scope and not just thinking about your own country, but how all the countries and movements need to help each other and cooperate.
Come to Cuba with as open mind as possible. As people from the United States, we have so many preconceived notions of different places.
Venezuela's Brigade, I think, is the best example of solidarity that I've experienced in my lifetime. It inspires me to this day, because without this kind of example, we wouldn't know, we couldn't even imagine what is possible in our life. So it's expanded my whole imagination about what I need to do, how I need to stick with it and never give up. The Cubans have a saying, no se rinde, no se vende. We don't give up and we don't sell out.
We are the brigade! We are the brigade! 50th brigade! 50th brigade! Mighty, mighty brigade! Mighty, mighty brigade! Diverse brigade! Diverse brigade!
Thank you all. So after speaking with one of the members of the leadership of the Vincent Ramos Brigade, she asked me to remind folks that they want as many young African and indigenous youth to join the brigade as possible. Everyone's welcome. Yet wanted to also remind you all that the Vincent Ramos Brigade is led by most of the youth. They coordinate, they organize, they do a lot of work. So please support them. You saw the information on the slide in regards to how to get in contact. The application is already ready. And then also prepare for April. Towards the end of April, we'll be heading out to Cuba for the Mayday Brigade. So please join us for that. Thank you all for allowing us time to provide you some information and updates about the solidarity work that's going on. And if you want more information about the NNOC, please visit our website. Cheryl should be putting up the slide right there. You can reach our website, Twitter, all of that good information, y'all. So thank you all again. Forward to the revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, comrades, so much, Cheryl and Mimut. We appreciate your participation. The website for the NNOC is nnoc.info, and you can also find the brigade information on Instagram and Twitter at BB4 Cuba. So now we will open the floor to some questions. Live audience, you can step up to the mic, and we will be taking questions also over Zoom. So the first question we have from our Zoom audience is based on UN resolutions. Only the US and Israel are expressly supporting current sanctions on Cuba. What legal means does the US or these other nations have to prevent the world from trading with Cuba?
So go ahead, Cheryl, you got it.
Well, the part of the state sponsors of terrorism is one way. The Helms-Burton that actually allows the United States to fine other countries, fine banks, for example, in Canada, there was like a coffee vendor that sold Cuban coffee, right? In Canada, it's a different country. And their money was seized by the US Office of Foreign Asset Controls. Honda Motor was also fined. Honda Motor, because in Canada, the Cuban embassy leased Honda cars for their embassy, and it had to go through Honda Financials, and that's in California. So it's very, very, it's hard to figure out, and a lot of organizations just go, well, listen, it's just not worth the risk of getting afoul of the US. Go ahead, Mimut, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem at all. The US figures out ways to justify all of the insanity that they got going on. I don't think there's anything legal or humane about the blockade. Yet one thing that is inspirational for me, and when I talk to people across this country about the UN vote, most folks assume, based on the propaganda we receive here in the United States, that everyone is for the blockade. So once we're able to present information and documentation to prove to them that majority of the folks who vote or the countries who vote at the UN, they're opposed to the blockade, then they start asking questions. Well, how can two countries dictate after everyone else voted? And we see the power of the United States, yet we also see and know through history the power of the masses. So this is one of the things that we can rally around in regards to knowing that there's other countries who are opposed to this blockade.
And the dates this year are November 2nd and 3rd.
Thank you both so much. Do we have a question from the audience that we have ready? Okay. Well, I will go into one more question from the Zoom audience on the resolutions that are against the Cuban blockade that we have seen from the NNOC's efforts in the United States. There are a considerable amount from communities in the South, in conservative areas. So can you talk to us a little bit about how we in the United States stand in solidarity, specifically in these more conservative areas, and how we get them to jump on to support opening an economic trade with Cuba?
Sure, you can take the lead on this one, and I'll have a comment at the end for sure.
Okay. Well, part of it is just doing it, finding someone who is friendly. And it's interesting that the Alabama state legislature, one of the parts of the state legislature, did pass a resolution and against the blockade. And it's because Alabama had been a major trading partner. And so it really takes somebody looking at who can be, who is it that can be approached on that. is there, for example, the Democratic Party in Miami, or a segment of it, passed a resolution against the blockade, even though a lot of the Democratic politicians have bent under the pressure of the political establishment in Washington. So it's just a matter of going after it. And we'll help you. That's the other thing. The National Network on Cuba is here to, we have no paid staff. We're all volunteers. But we're here because we're dedicated to doing this work. And there are others, particularly on the West Coast, that have developed that guideline for how to get a resolution passed. We have people who work in the labor movement. California, for example, has done a lot of work. They've gotten the state council. The Washington State Council for several conventions has passed resolutions. CLU passed a resolution. APALA, the Pacific Islanders labor organization. There are friends inside the, many of the constituent organizations of the AFL-CIO. So if you want to try and you've got an idea, we'll be glad to try to work with you.
So thank you, Cheryl. I would just add, there's a saying Kwame Ture used to say back in the day, how do we get the reactionary to work for the revolution? And sometimes some of these folks in government, we know they're reactionary. Yet I would also encourage us to be careful, because also sometimes folks will show their two cards and they're actually opportunists. Some of the folks want to end the blockade so that they can benefit financially without any concerns of the Cuban people and their economic system. So we want to make sure we're clear. We need to be organized as the masses when we do things like this. Yet, like I said, Kwame Ture was very clear. How do we make the reactionary work for the revolution? And these resolutions can be helpful in that sense. Because once again, it's important for the masses to see that there are folks in government, as well as the people, the working class people and everyone else who are in favor of ending the blockade and are in support of the Cuban people. So these are other examples, like I said about the UN vote, these are other examples that can inspire and motivate our folks to get up and say something about what's going on in Cuba.
All right, with that, we will end the Q&A. Thank you, comrades, both for your participation. We deeply, deeply appreciate it. And as a reminder, don't forget to donate to the NNOC campaign we are running for the awesome work that they are doing.